All right, there we go. Welcome in. Let's get our Facebook folks in here before it's officially time to start the show. Getting the wheel spinning. All right, 1 and 2. All right, welcome in. It is the Monday morning that almost wasn't. I am Nick Kendall and joined by Scott Kennedy. Scott, it's good to see you. Who needs coffee when your alarm doesn't go off, phone's dead, and baby wakes up and you haul your you-know-what downstairs to join for the end of the other show?
There's nothing to wake you up like panic. Oh, I'm awake now, baby.
It's been a couple years, I feel like, since I've done that. But when the alarm doesn't go off,
your 5:30 wake up call, not even wake up call, your 5:30 call time, you're allowed to mess one up every year or so.
I remember it the last time it hhappened. It probably was almost 3 years ago. But you know what? We're here.
I was scared the first time it happened.
Yeah, I remember I had a bunch of messages and I'm like,
I don't know where he is. I hope everything's okay.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, he's just sleeping.
Yeah, no, he's okay. Tired. Didn't go to bed at 9 o'clock like a normal Sunday, right? That too, probably, but I don't know. Didn't go off. It's all good. But we're here now. We're hanging out, and we're going to go through the game-by-game prediction today. Obviously, if there's anything else that you guys want to talk about today, hit us up in the chat. Click the thumbs up on in the way in. But yeah, no, we are in the slow lead-up to the regular season. I mean, hopefully, Scott, I don't know if you got to enjoy some college football this weekend, kind of as an appetizer for what's to come. But yeah, football is, we have less than a week now. We're going to know what the Broncos are going to be record-wise first weekend a week from now.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's either going to be 1-0 or 0-1, or the old dad jokes. I can tell you what the record's going to be before the season even starts. 0-0. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, so it should be a lot of fun. We're going to go through the game. Scott, do you remember what we had record-wise last time we went through the schedule?
I've missed high every year we've done this.
Okay, but I meant we'd had a game-by-game prediction back in like May.
Yeah. I may have gone. I don't remember that we did it for sure because it was so negative.
I feel like we did, and I had 6
I was probably in the neighborhood of 5-12.
Yeah, I think I had 6 as well. So we'll see what happens. You are correct in saying, Scott, that every year we have overshot a little bit. I think last year we might have actually hit it because last year we didn't have super high expectations because of Russell Wilson's wheels obviously falling off there, even with Sean Payton. But I think we were close last year. Maybe we went 8-9. But yeah, every year we've overshot it, and I know people in the chat will be, maybe if we don't, predict Denver going to the playoffs, some people in the chat will be like, "Oh, you guys are just haters. Can't say anything positive." It's like, well, every year we've been too positive to date. Now, granted, it does feel like things are changing in the right direction in Denver, and they're building something stable, it feels like, as well. But for all the actions, not the words, right? It does feel like it's a team that's feisty, young. We don't know what we don't know kind of narrative. That doesn't really lend itself to playoff contender, just maybe, feisty week to week.
Well, they're building from the ground up. It's hard to, when you think you're one player away, okay, let's sell the future for that. Well, you did. And it turns out you weren't at least that one player away, and it mortgages the future, and you have some lean years for it. Now it feels like, hey, we're gonna build this thing from the ground up. Now, there's still a lot of pitfalls along the way, but that's how you build a sustainable winning team is through the draft. I mean, Nick, we talked about this last night on the Mile High Huddle podcast, but I was going through Bleacher Report did a list of the 10 top free agents, guys that are just on their last year of their contracts. The 10 top free agents in the NFL for 2025 as it stands right this minute. And Garrett Bowles was number 6 on that list. I'm like, okay, one, that tells you a couple things, but the biggest takeaway for me is just how freaking hard it is to try and build a team through free agency. Where would you have traded Garrett Bowles? It's like, okay, well, I'll take a 3rd round pick and $15 million in cap space to trade Garrett Bowles in the offseason. This is the number 6 guy. So unless you think you are, okay, this is the guy, Russell Wilson was the guy, we had all the pieces around him, I get it. I don't think anybody really disagreed with the trade at the time. But if it doesn't work, you can go downhill in a hurry. And now it's a slow build, but it's more sustainable, I guess is what I'm trying to spit out.
And it's possible that things could take off rapidly if Bo Nix ends up being, a revelation at quarterback. If you have the guy, if he comes in here and is CJ Stroud, Andrew Luck, Cam Newton rookie season, then things can turn around quickly in Denver. But you're talking about the rarest of the rares rookie seasons and talent levels. So I think I don't know how much national media listen to Scott, just kind of getting the feel of Bo Nix. A lot of people, Daniel Jeremiah, Nick Wright, somebody else on NFL Network, they're talking about Bo Nix, and the narrative's kind of changed a little bit. I feel like there's been a temperature change with Bo Nix. It's not, does he belong? It's, is he already at his ceiling? Is he going to come in, Mac Jones it year one, and be like, oh my gosh, look how good he is, and people are going to be fooled. Not my words, but
And
fooled.
Mac Jones wasn't that good.
No, he wasn't, but he was,
He was okay. He was good for a rookie.
Yes.
He wasn't good. He was like 16th or 17th in the NFL. He was okay on the grand scheme of things, but he was good for a rookie.
Yes. And again, not saying that's what I think about Bo Nix, but that seems to be the narrative change that has occurred here in the last month with Nix playing well in preseason, Sean Payton, Broncos country gushing about him. It's like, oh, he's good, but people are going to take the cheese and get fooled thinking that he's just going to keep getting better when really he's going to come in kind of who he is already, not going to get much better, and Mac Jones it, so to speak. The air quotes there for people listening after the fact. So we'll see. But the one thing is, I will take the positive on that is that he does look like he belongs. Granted, we're going off preseason football, but the floor is so much higher, and we're going to be able to see a lot of different things that Sean Payton wants to do. I mean, really, Scott, this is totally off topic here. You can tell the coffee's starting to kick in. We probably haven't seen a Sean Payton offense in the NFL. This will be 3 years now, because we kind of tried to see it last season, but there's a reason that the offense was struggled so much in the first few quarters, and it always have to devolve, using the word devolve, into rust ball, out of pocket, hanging on, trying to throw things. Oh, immaculate plays outside of structure, but not within the scheme, not within the design. Obviously, we missed the year before when he was out of the league. This feels like we'll actually get Sean Payton football, and I'm really curious to see what innovations has in place, because it's been 3 years now.
Yeah, I heard this phrase 20-something years ago, and it's always stuck with me. The broken play is no basis for an offense. And that's kind of what you would get into, and Russ would do the amazing. But, Sean Payton is a control freak. Again, to get to the level that he has been, that's not a hot take. He's an egomaniac control freak. Yes.
But he's ours.
Yes, he is. He doesn't want his quarterback freelancing, and that's what Russ does best. It was a bad fit. It was a bad fit. And we know now, we've got all the proof in the world. Sean Payton did not take this job without assurances that he could move on at quarterback after year one if he needed to. Yes, we will take this dead cap hit. You do have permission to move on if need be. And he did.
Yep. So we'll see what happens year two. Obviously, the Broncos have horrible Vegas over-under odds, Scott. The win total for Denver this season is 5.5. It has not budged with preseason football. There's only one team that has a worse win total in all the NFL, Scott, and that is the New England Patriots at 4.5. So we'll see. Now, that being said, a vast majority of the money from bettors is coming in on the over on the Broncos, but that doesn't always mean that that's going to happen. We haven't seen the Vegas line shift at all, and a lot of times teams that have big fan bases, you'll see them have the more positive betting lines on there compared to what the Vegas line is. So I think this is probably a lot of Bronco fans rushing in and maybe pushing their thumb on the scale just a little bit on the over on that. But I'll be honest, I'm probably going to go over 5.5 as well. Now, if Vegas would have changed the line after preseason and moved it at 6.5, we'll see. And Scott and I don't know if Scott's done this yet. We have not. We're going to go game by game, and it's going to be live reaction. We haven't calculated what it's going to be already to make sure that we get the right win total or anything, but we'll see. And speaking of the right totals and everything, we got some stars coming in. Nugmaster asking, Scott, what class did you play in D&D? I bet your alignment was lawful evil.
See, that's offensive to me. That he did that. You don't know me at all. Lawful? Hell no, man. Lawful? No. Chaotic for sure. But I have a good heart. I do not believe in following the rules. I was not a freaking hall monitor, for God's sakes. I'm chaotic good, man. How you end up, I'm good, but I don't believe that there's one strict way to get there. I'm a chaos merchant, but I'm good. Chaotic good for sure. And I am an environmental guy. I've always been a nature guy, so I like the ranger class. Chaotic good ranger, that's where I would go.
All right. Well, it's speaking a different language than me, but I would say chaotic good is how I would describe my dog. So we got Eric Flynn coming in. Good to see you, Eric. Happy Labor Day to you, and thanks for joining us. And our guy, Michael Ronquillo, of course, says good morning, Nick and Scott and Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos. Always great to see you. Michael Evans in the house. Good morning. Dom's in the house. Always great to see you, Dom. Greg Smith. Excuse me. Good morning, Broncos for breakfast. Always awesome to see you, my guy. Mike Evans, our resident Cards fan, says, like my Cards 6-8 wins got so bad here, adopting the Packers. Oh, Michael, you can't just move on to a new team. I don't know what's going on. I mean, you can do what you want, right? It's free country. But I think I like what Gannon's doing a lot there. You got a fun stadium out there in Arizona, and Marvin Harrison Jr. should be a good time. So Kyler Murray's back. You got rid of Cliff, who obviously was in over his head. I wouldn't abandon Post just yet.
Roy, good to see you, Roy. You said 29 days and counting. You sent me a private message. I'm thinking that's like until like retirement of sorts, I would hope. So good morning, Nick and Scott. Everybody got the day off. Happy Labor Day. Very slim chance to build a team in free agency. It's hard. You can supplement things, but the people who win free agency rarely win at all. That's for sure. And there's something in there, that the teams that spend the most in free agency have a losing record most of the time, Nick. And a lot of times they got a bunch of money because they haven't been very good. They haven't had to pay second contracts to the players they've got because they don't have any players.
Well, it seems like the last decade, it's been a lot of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I'll say it's the Jaguars every year, and eventually, pile that up with being really bad and having like 4 top 5 picks, and you end up decent.
Yep. Sometimes it doesn't work out. You asked the Lions for a long time too, doing that, but
they weren't ever spending that kind of money. That was the thing too. They weren't ever big players in free agency.
The Jags and the Commanders feel like they were the two that were pretty perennially poor. And spending big money on guys. I mean, the Kirk contract, the Aluakon, the linebacker that they paid huge money. I mean, it's just kind of crazy sometimes. But the good teams tend to spend money to retain their own talent. They draft and develop and then retain talents. And you see like the fringe players on those teams be let go. The teams, the players that like the 49ers viewed like, you're good, but you're not good enough to keep. And then some other team will pay them an unbelievable amount of money. So I'd always be a little bit skeptical, breaking the bank, setting all-time contract records on players that you didn't draft and develop, because there's always like a inflation when it comes to the open market. So good to see you, Roy. We got James coming in, says some think it's playoffs. We'll press the brakes on that. Let's get through this first week, MHH Broncos country, and Marion, Ohio.
Marion, Ohio. Yeah. I was born in Akron, so not too far from there.
There you go. Well, yeah, I think we'll probably press the brakes too on that, but I'd love to be wrong. We'll see. Denver says, good morning. Can't wait for this game. Feels like an eternity since last year. Yeah, we'll break down that game Wednesday in here. Kathy's in here. Hi guys. Was one lone soul that was never wanted to trade for Wilson. Watson or Rodgers always wanted to go through the draft route, but also wanted to find a head coach first. Yeah, I mean, Denver thought they found their head coach, right? I think that was the first year. You obviously do. We didn't have anything else. They just hired him. You obviously hire somebody to think they're the guy. But man, what a unbelievable epic fail that Hackett Wilson season was.
And the problem is you've got a roster that was full of, your top players are in their primes, so to speak. You got Cortland Sutton, Justin Simmons, Garrett Bowles. You had Von Miller at the time, I think, when you made that trade, or was that the year before? But Bradley Chubb's on the team. These are all guys that are mid-20s to late 20s to early 30s. And I don't necessarily want to put a rookie quarterback on that team and let them go for, I need 3 years. My window's 3 years from now, because then those guys would be too old. So they went for it with a quarterback now. Let's plug this in. And, there's a team down south doing something similar, but then they hedged with a rookie quarterback too, because they didn't give away their first round draft pick. But I'm almost always for building through the draft. I'm a draft guy, and then you supplement through free agency and trades. It's
Mhm.
just hard. It's hard to get a quarterback a non-traditional route. It doesn't happen real often.
Yeah, I think a lot of Broncos country was our paths to elite quarterbacks have been odd, right? You had the
Mhm.
John Elway situation where I will not play for the Colts and you trade for him. And then you had Peyton Manning released only because the best quarterback prospect, arguably ever, since John Elway, was in that draft the year that Peyton Manning missed and that team was dreadful. And then you get Peyton Manning through free agency. I mean, not your normal
Right.
pathways towards answers at quarterback. Probably two of the most random ones in the entire league,
And then it
honestly.
has to line up perfectly where your team is in a spot where, hey, that team's good enough that I
Yeah.
can come in there and make that difference, which that again, it Denver's been the exception. I kind of count Elway as through the draft. I mean, you
Yeah.
got him as a prospect. He didn't play for anybody else. That kind of counts to me. Um, but again, it's hard through free agency and hitting on the draft is how you build the foundation of your team for sure.
Yep.
But
And
other part of this, Nick, was who would you have gotten? What that was. I'm getting my years rolled together, but wasn't the year you got him? Wasn't that the Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ritter year of quarterbacks?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, okay, well, what about Brock Purdy? Man, I'm not playing whataboutism with y'all. I'm
Yeah.
just not.
Yeah.
What about Malik Willis? What about Kenny Pickett? What about Desmond Ritter? Those were the guys that got drafted.
Yep. Yeah, it was a horrific class. Who knows what happened. I mean, they've been bad for so long. I didn't feel the urgency to be like, oh, this has to be the year that you get it right. Right. I mean, they did have a bunch of veterans still, but I don't know. You only really mess up as if you make the wrong call on that, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of kicking the can for a season. But
Yeah, and if you, I still think there isn't anybody that's going to argue you would have been worse off not making that trade. You've been better off drafting Kenny Pickett than making that Russell Wilson deal because you could have moved on for him for cheap.
yep.
It
And you
wouldn't have
had another
cost you as
first
much.
though.
You wouldn't have been. I think you would have been a worse team for what people think about Russell Wilson. He had a pretty good statistical year last year, and Kenny Pickett was god awful.
Hmm.
Desmond Ritter, come on.
Yeah.
Malik Willis hasn't really played at all, and he's been moved on. So, but you would have had your money in draft picks back
Yep.
to make a move for maybe a quarterback this year, which you think you got anyway. So here we go, full circle.
Yeah.
2025, we've recovered.
We're on the road for sure. We got a stimulus here with this 2024 draft class. We got KB82 talking about the draft. He says that Travis Hunter has Travis Hunter proved he can play cornerback and play 10 to 15 snaps on offense in a game in the NFL. I mean, I don't think you prove that until you are in the league. We'll see what happens with Travis Hunter. Had an unbelievable game against North Dakota State. That was pretty fun there on Friday night. We'll see. I mean, it's going to be a fun conversation. I think he's more body type at cornerback, but he can play wide receiver as well. And there's much more money to be had if you are a top wide receiver compared to a top cornerback. Just where the league is right now, like the 10th highest paid wide receiver is getting paid a lot more than the 10th highest paid cornerback. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's like I put so much money into my wide receiver. I don't want him to play corner. I don't want him on defense where he could get hurt. We're going to
Yeah.
put these guys in kid gloves. So, we'll see. It's, can they is one thing. I think there's a lot of guys that could play two ways, but we're also talking about a sport where we don't want people to play it.
Mm-hmm.
What other sport do you say, no, we're not going to play them in this warm-up scrimmage practice. We're not going to have them practice because we don't want them to get hurt. There's no other sport in the world like that. Boxing, MMA, you spar.
Yeah.
As the roughest sport, hockey, you have scrimmages. You don't hold guys out. I mean, this game is different, and it's sometimes I feel a little guilty about how much enjoyment we get from it while these guys are sacrificing their bodies out there. Want to make sure we said hello to some of our contributors. Make sure we said hello to Eric coming in with some stars. Michael as well coming in with some stars. Good to see you. Michael Evans, thank you, sir, coming in on the super chat. Says thank you guys for the great shows. And then Gary, good to see you, GLP. Good morning, Nick and Scott. Good morning, right back at you. Appreciate you coloring us up, keeping the lights on, keeping my forehead nice and shiny here with the lights. So thank y'all for the support. It means a lot to us.
Thank you. We got Monica in here too. This year's about the new team and building chemistry with Bo Nix. That'd be great. So she says, I think we win more than 5 games and more importantly, some divisional games. It's time for Denver to beat the Raiders again. I just can't take how bad the Raiders are. and how Denver hasn't beaten them since 2019. I mean, that's just it's not okay. That's my least favorite team, and the Chiefs are getting very annoying, very fast, obviously. But I despise the Raiders, and it's time to beat them for sure.
It's turning into a Falcons-Saints rivalry. I mean, that was like one of the best rivalries in football that nobody knew about because both teams were bad. Like, y'all, this is the Raiders and Broncos. We need to get you back on the national stage. So it will come. Couple wins, and people will be talking Broncos. They're too big of a brand, and the Raiders, they're too big of a brand not to get the national media attention.
Yeah. Yep. Jason coming in. The new narrative is simply analysts trying to protect their pre-draft status that Bo was overdrafted. Jaden is 24. Are they saying that about him? Be interesting to dig into this a lot more at some point. We'll see what happens. I guess what I would say is Bo Nix's average depth of target was like 3 yards less than the lowest in the entire league last season. So like the check down underneath status stuff kind of does limit the offense and the ability to create explosive plays down the field, right? I don't even know if he logged a true big time throw, but it's great. The sample size is so small. The defenses they were playing very vanilla off coverage. It's not a true test, right? So like we can't make these grand sweeping judgments off of what we saw in preseason. We saw that he can execute the offense. He's got enough arm talent. He's athletic. His athleticism is a plus, especially in that frame. And it didn't seem like too much for him, but there's things to work on. I mean, those are the things we can take away, but not the grand sweeping. We're going to have a season play out to make much better judgment of the player.
Right now, you got a hyped up Sam Ellinger. Remember when we the Broncos played against the Colts and they showed Sam Ellinger, and I think even their own broadcast guys were calling him Mr. August because he's got like 110 quarterback rating in August. He hasn't played because he's playing against twos and threes, and that's where Bo Nix has been again. But you can only play who they put in front of you, and Bo Nix has passed the test but so now it's time for the next test, and the next test is a big one, going up to Seattle and playing the Seattle defense in Seattle is against Mike McDonald. That's going to be a big test, and if he fails it, does that mean he's a failure? No. If he passes it with flying colors, well, I like that. That would encourage me more, Nick. That would encourage me more than him failing it would discourage me.
Yeah.
You almost expect a rookie quarterback to struggle on the road against Seattle. That's expected. So it won't be, it's like, oh my God, this is awful. He's a bust. No, it's expected for him to struggle. If he doesn't, that raises my eyebrows a little bit more.
Yeah. And especially because a lot of the conversations around rookie of the year this year is Caleb Williams' heavy favorite. And it's because the supporting cast in Chicago has been really built up. I mean, they have better tight end than
talking
Denver.
About money and draft picks, right, Nick?
Yep. Just in a better position to succeed from it on paper and offensive infrastructure. Now we'll see about their scheme and Eberflus being the head coach. I mean, that's one benefit that Bo Nix has that these other guys don't, is that you have Sean Payton in your pocket, calling and designing the plays. But we'll see what happens. It's just the Denver. I feel like Nick's can be great this year, but he could still end up looking mediocre because outside of Sutton, I mean, who's doing anything on offense? Are we banking on Dulcich? Is Vele all of a sudden going to be like a worthy of like oh man, he was way underdrafted. He should have been a first round pick. Like, is that going to happen? Marvin Mims showing out, Javonte Williams being healthy. I mean, that's a big one, but do they have the depth at running back? I mean, we were excited about Jaleel McLaughlin. I know fantasy community is because Peyton loves to utilize multiple running backs, but completely wait and see on a lot of these things. So it's not necessarily if Bo Nix, just Bo Nix as well. I'm always, like to separate the excuses from the reasons guys struggle out here. And we'll see what it looks like on tape. But I think that the offensive infrastructure and talent on the perimeter, especially, is something that could stymie Nix as well.
We got a question last night that I loved. It's like, who's the most important guy on each side of the ball that is not the quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
For the Denver Broncos. And, there's a lot of answers to that, but it almost came to me was like wide receiver 2, might be the answer because you got Sutton, but if the Denver Broncos cannot create any separation off the line, you're not going to be able to run the ball because you're going to be looking at 11 men boxes again. And if you can't get behind anybody, then you're Bo Nix, you could struggle and Bo Nix won't have anything to do with it. It won't be Bo Nix's fault that everybody is stacked. So the weapons, the guys around Bo Nix, offensive weapons, who we do have very big questions about, are going to have to separate, I guess pun intended, wordplay intended on this one, separate themselves and stand out. They're going to have to be able to make plays to back that defense off for Bo Nix to have a chance. Forget Bo Nix. If the offensive skill players cannot create on their own.
One thing I will say that they will have going for them in that regard is they can be a little bit tricky and utilize the quarterback run, which can draw an extra defender, so to speak, and create some different assignment issues for if they are crowding the box. There's still ways to run the football if the quarterback's a viable weapon as well, but you're going to limit yourself in explosive plays, and that's something that just keeps coming around. I like this Denver team. I like what they can do design-wise. Where are the explosives coming from? Because in the NFL, not to be, Nick talking about the same talking points again, everyone get excited, but turnovers and explosive plays are like two of the highest correlated things to the results on the field. You can't give them up. You got to create them. And last year, Denver, they created okay explosive plays wise, but are they going to be able to do it with Bo Nix? Do they have the weapons to do it? Is it even Bo Nix's fault? We're going to find out this season for sure. Troy coming in 1999 says, hey guys, from a dead cat pessimism to having a D-line and rookie class give hope. 9 wins. We start winning seasons again. And yeah, we'll start getting into it here. Thank you so much, Troy, for the optimism and the support for the show. Hope you're doing really well. And Joey says, where are the explosives coming from? He says, screen passes.
Let's get back to, I want to give Troy a little bit more attention on this one. Hey guys, from dead cap pessimism and having this new D-line and rookie class, it gives you hope. The dead cap pessimism is 30%. 30% of your available salary cap is allocated to players who are not playing for the Denver Broncos. 30%.
Crazy.
So if you've got 20 guys on your starting 11, that's 6 players, basically. 30%. That's a lot. I mean, it may go up a little more. There may be somebody else, but anyway, we call it $80 million. You got $80 million tied behind your back that you're not allowed to go out. And, how much would $80 million help this team? That's the kind of handicap you are forced with playing with right now. And not forced. It was a conscious decision, but you're out there with, I like to say, if you got 85 scholarships in college football, this is probation. You're going out there with 65 scholarships. We call that almost the death penalty. Now, it's not quite that bad in NFL because you can allocate different ways and there's cost controls and contracts, but it is a lot. It's significant. The good news is this is it. There's a decent sized cap number next year, but you're getting a lot of that back. Yes, you save almost $25 million in available money by not having Russell Wilson. That's a good thing. You're still taking a pretty good sized dead cap hit on it, but you're saving money. So the dead cap pessimism hasn't gone away. It's still there.
Yeah. And speaking of cap pessimism or positivity or anything like that, we do want to pull up here. There we go. The schedule. Broncos, we want to get through the game by game now that we're here. And I did see Joey here. He's talking about screen passes to the running backs. That can hopefully be part of the explosive plays. It is kind of hard to do that still if you're not creating space horizontally with your weapons, right? Clearing things out, so to speak, unless you're just, really good at the timing of it. And I do think the mobility of the offensive line in preseason looked pretty good of the starters. So we'll see. But you asked earlier, Scott, who the most important player on each side of the ball. It's not Bo Nix. I mean, wide receiver 2 is big, but it's probably going to be Javonte Williams for me, which is how much
that was one of my answers too. And then center was a popular one also, just because it all breaks down right there. But yeah, the side to side passing game is going to be big, but it's not as effective if your cornerbacks are impress man on the line of scrimmage because you can't get past them. You've got to be able to prove that you can get by those guys. Because another question we had was who plays a bigger role, Devon Vele or Marvin Mims? And I was like, well, I think it's going to end up being Vele based on what we've seen, and because I'm going to want him out there blocking because there's going to be so much sideways passing in this offense to start. But if I can't have any kind of vertical threat, it's going to hurt the screen game, and that's why I put that in there, Nick.
We'll see. I'm hoping it's Mims just for the speed element and explosive plays, but we'll see. I mean, the higher investment cleared out a pathway for him in the slot.
MIA.
Yeah, no, he has been. He's got to learn to run routes, and deal with physicality, which been an issue. But we got the schedule here. Broncos start off here on the road at Seattle. I'm feeling feisty here, Scott. I'm going to go with a win in this one. I know that Denver's 5.5 point dogs, but I'm going to pick a win on that first one.
5.5 points is going to be one of the most significant numbers. And I will go with Seattle at this one. Road game, Seattle, tough place to play. I'm going to go with Seattle in this one.
Smart money, I would say. But we got Jetty Splash coming in. Did I miss you guys to speak of both excellence, getting rid of the ball quickly when all receivers are covered instead of bouncing around the pocket and waiting to get slammed? Yeah, that's good. That's something that actually Sean Payton talked about it as something that he needs to work on. Standing in the pocket and getting through his reads not too quickly, coming off his primary too quickly when the guy is still going to be coming open. That was something at Oregon too. Nix wasn't sacked very much, but a lot of times if that first play didn't go to the singular guy it was supposed to, it would be to the check down really quickly. And that was part of their Oregon offense. NFL, it does seem like Sean Payton wants Nix to be able to manipulate the pocket and hang on that read a little bit longer. So it is a positive, but it's complicated still at the same time because you might be leaving some meat on the bone, so to speak, if you're coming off that primary read before it is time. So that's
that was the other thing. We had a question last night, Nick. I'd like to get your take on these things too. It's like, what are some realistic numbers for Bo Nix in this game? And, I came up with, Zach and I had the exact same number for yards. We said 220 yards, and I said 2 touchdowns, an interception, and then maybe 40 yards rushing, going back to the running game out of it. But the question for me is, what about sacks? What about sacks? Because for all of the talk about Russell Wilson, before they drafted Bo Nix, there was, talk that Jarrett Stidham could be the starting quarterback of this team. Well, Jarrett Stidham was actually sacked at a higher rate in his starts than Russell Wilson was. So it wasn't all Russell Wilson. Quarterbacks still get sacked. Well, Russell Wilson was responsible for 75% of the sacks. Well, the other quarterbacks are responsible for 65% of the sacks. It doesn't mean the sacks are going to go away, but they should be lower. They should absolutely be lower. So let's get it down to 2 sacks a game and have it be 34 instead of 60. Cut it in half. If he's only sacked twice, that's a positive. So yes. Yeah. And I want to see 3rd and 3 a hell of a lot more often than 3rd and 14, like we have the last 3 years, Nick.
Yeah. Yep. Saying a positive. That's another reason. It's just so hard to score if you're constantly having to get 10, 15 play drives to get touchdowns. Kind of saw it in Wisconsin Friday night, right? Their opening drive, 16 plays, marching down the field. And it ends up in a missed field goal. I mean, okay, you chewed up half the first quarter and you methodically move the ball, but because you didn't have any explosives and you didn't execute, you get nothing for it on the scoreboard. So explosives are key. Explosives are key. So I got Denver 1-0. You got them 0-1. We got the Steelers then week 2, the Mile High Huddle meet and greet. I'm going to go with another win here. Denver 2-0. Maybe it's the coffee kicking in. I'm feeling good here. But Denver going 2-0 in this one and getting that dub.
Home, I like the win too. Home game. I'm out. I'm a Mike Tomlin stan. They'll probably still find a way to go 9-8 this year. But man, I'm out on the Steelers right now. Between Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, they're a complete who's cornerback 2? Who cares? Van Jefferson's your wide receiver 2 at Pittsburgh right now. I could be quarterback 2. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but they look really scary bad on offense again. And they were awful last year. Still ended up in the playoffs, I think.
Yeah.
Take the under on this one. The under on this one, it's going to be like 16-13. So if the under is anything 35 or more, take the under. I'll go with a dub here at the meet and greet too. And we'll be there. We'll be there for it. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We'll see what happens. Kind of crazy, things could have changed. Emily, if Denver ends up agreeing to trade Sutton, then Ayuk's a Steeler, and then Ayuk's coming here, and maybe it's a different team. Maybe that's a difference in Denver getting a win here or not. But I have Denver 2-0. You have them 1-1. Now we go on the road at Tampa Bay. Hot, muggy, East Coast loss. I can't see Denver winning this one. They can't win in Florida in September. It just doesn't happen. So they're going to lose this one.
Last time I was at Tampa Stadium, I think it was a bowl game in January, and I was sitting in the sun. I went inside. We had actually club level seats, so we could go into the inside. I went and sat inside because I was like, this game sucks for one thing. I really don't care about watching the Florida Gators right now. I was so hot, I went and sat in the concourse and just sat down in the shade. Yeah,
in
it's
January.
going to be tough. I've got an L on this one too, because on top of that, Tampa's a pretty good team.
Yeah.
Tampa's a team that made the final 8 last year. Final 8. I don't think they made the final 4. No, it was San Francisco. They made the final 8 last year. They're a solid team. So I'll go with an L on that one also.
Then we got the Jets. Aaron Rodgers, kind of another team maybe in some funk. Denver hasn't been able to seem to beat the Jets here as of late. Now they got Zach Wilson, so maybe they got a chance, right? But no, I'll go with Denver losing this one as well, going to 2-2 in that first quartile of games, which is about anybody could hope for realistically.
Yeah, road game, and the Jets defense is solid. Aaron Rodgers should make a difference on this one. I won't feel ready to burn everything down like I did last year with Nathaniel Hackett and Zach Wilson. But we'll see. We'll see with Aaron Rodgers. That's the wild card there because they're not good enough without him. But I want to see a full year of Aaron Rodgers. I'm not ready to. I want to see him go out on sort of his own terms. But yeah, Denver's an underdog in that one too for a reason.
Yep. So now we got the Denver at you're at 1-3. I'm at 2-2. We got the Raiders then at Denver, beating the Raiders. Denver wins 3-2 here. A positive record here, staying feisty early in the season. I got them beating the Raiders at home.
So, Dub, when's the last time they beat the Raiders?
December 2019.
And how many times have we picked them to beat the Raiders at home since you and I have been doing this?
A lot.
Every year.
A lot.
Every year. Stupid, right? So
it doesn't make
just
sense.
Just keep banging my head on there. So I'll go with a dub on that one too. Gardner Minshew's an underrated quarterback for what he is, but they've got their own problems too, and somehow they still find a way to beat the Broncos. But I'm going to keep Charlie Brown in this one and swing my foot at the ball and see if Lucy kicks it out from under me, and I'll go with a dub on that one too. So
Denver, you have them 2-3. I have them 3-2. Next up, another home game, the Chargers. I'm gonna go with the loss of this one. I think Denver, they tend to the Chargers. It doesn't really matter if they're home or away against the Chargers. It feels like they just kind of a coin flip every time in the last decade. So I'll go with Jim Harbaugh coming into Denver and getting a win in Denver. So Denver falls to 3-3.
Yeah, I think they'll be more fundamentally sound, the Chargers, than they have been in the past with Harbaugh as a quarterback. And he ended up being maybe a disaster, coming in with a big college ego, and he may be a disaster. I don't think so. He's had success everywhere he's been. I think they're going to be a better team than they were last year. I have a loss on that one also. Then Denver heads to warm, hot, muggy New Orleans, October 17th. We'll see what the weather's like then. It's in a dome. Doesn't really matter that much. Okay, come on. Don't do this to me, Nick. You know that one's in a dome.
Yeah, I know that's in a dome, but it's just heading out. I got a loss in this one too. Saints are probably a tier better than Denver in paper, and then heading on the road too. I just think that'll be a loss. So another loss. This is the home away factor for me. I'd pick the home team in this game. I don't know if you're muted or what happened here, but you. I'm muted. Sorry, I cleared my throat. Okay. I'm here. Now we got the Panthers coming up. This is the one team that has the same over-under prediction as Denver. Probably worse than the Patriots, but because they play in the NFC and the NFC South, they're getting one more win total according to Vegas. So 5.5. I think Denver's going to end up beating the Panthers in this one. So moves Denver for me 4-4 on the season. Yeah, I have that one a win too, and I think this is one of the few times on paper Denver will be favored this year. Yeah. Obviously, that'll change as the season goes along if Denver can start stringing together some games. But as the preseason sets, it's probably the only two games they'll be favored in is that Oakland or the Raiders game in Denver and this Panthers game. So we'll see what happens. Next up, Scott, I'm going to put these two together. The Ravens and the Ravens and the Chiefs here, both on the road. Unbelievable to put these two teams on the road back to back. I think Denver will end up losing both of these. Shocker there. They'll be probably big underdogs. You never know, right? Last year, Denver's toughest two-game stretch was Kansas City and then at Buffalo, and they ended up going 2-0. So yeah, you lose to the Jets at home and the Commanders and the Patriots. And you beat those two teams. So it evened out kind of how we thought it would, which happens. But when we're going into this, we're not going to predict
losing at home to the Chargers and Raiders, and then going on the road and beating the Ravens and Chiefs. I mean, these are the two favorites really for the AFC again.
Yep. So I have them losing these two games. I also have them losing at home versus the Falcons. I think the Falcons are going to be able to come in and do enough offensively that Denver's going to have some issues. So Falcons are a dark horse team this year. Obviously, we covered them on the other side. I'm high on them. They have questions. We don't have to go into a whole Falcons analysis, but I got Denver losing that one.
Yeah, I do too. And this is where it starts coming in tiers, where we've picked 3 losses in a row, and you still feel pretty good about that. At Baltimore, at Kansas City, so let's move on to the next 3. And you go Falcons, Raiders, at Raiders, Cleveland at home. Now, the Broncos will probably be underdogs in all 3 of those games, but the probability of them losing all 3 of those games is super low. It'll end up being like 15%. So who do you pick here? I guess I'll go, I picked the Raiders at home. I'm not going to pick them sweeping the freaking Raiders after not beating them for a long time. So I'll say maybe you get the Cleveland Browns at home, and that one turns into a win in the Battle of the Oranges.
That's exactly what I was going to do. I was going to do loss against the Falcons, splitting with the Raiders, and then beating the Browns. Browns are weird right now. I mean, I really like Kevin Stefanski, and they got some good defensive talent, but the Russell Wilson trade has been bad, but Deshaun Watson trade might be worse, Scott. I mean, he's not looked good. They're worried about him.
Deshaun Watson's been awful. It's been terrible. And who do they get him from?
Texans.
And the Texans are the darling of the league right now. That's not a coincidence.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy watching the Browns kind of fall apart, and with everything with Watson, it's crazy. But I got Denver getting a win there, so that'd be up to 5 wins now. So all I need is 1 more for me to have them beat the over/under and be more positive than the Vegas line. But Scott has them at 4. Bye week, I think Denver's going to do really well this week. They're good week. I'm glad they have it late. Then after that, you got the Colts, Chargers, Bengals, and Chiefs. I'm going to have Denver losing to the Colts in this one. I think that this is kind of a toss-up game as well. It could go either way, but I'll have them losing that one. Beating the Chargers on the road, Scott, so getting up to that 6 wins, and then dropping the final 2 to the Bengals and the Chiefs. So that gets Denver to 6 wins. Sean Payton, sorry, come for me, I guess. Call me out. That'd be fine. I deserve it, especially if they do better than 6 wins. He said, the next time a team that I coach as a head coach wins 6 games will be the first, is what he said in an interview. Well, Sean, you had a Hall of Fame quarterback for a majority of your time. And not this amount of dead cap to deal with in a division that has, 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. It's different circumstances, Sean, and I don't think 6 wins is a bad season for Denver as long as young players are emerging and you're heading in a positive direction. So I have Denver going 6 there. What do you think about this last quartile game, Scott?
Again, when you break this down in tiers, there's a chance they won't be favored in any of them. Okay. But so much can change by the time we get to the middle of December between teams. Is Anthony Richardson even still playing?
Yeah.
Because their backup quarterback is Joe Flacco. That's going to change everything for the Colts. Are they sick of Jim Harbaugh in LA? They're tired of him. And they're like, okay, we're going to have to tear this down and rebuild it. Where are the Bengals even in? Are they still fighting for anything? Are the Chiefs? Are they playing backups on this? So I think with the last quarter of the season, the Broncos should be playing better. The games will be we're trying to build where some of the other teams are either packing it in or resting. I think you can get a split in these somehow, some way to go 2-2. And I think that puts me at 6-11.
You're at 6-11 as well. So we both come out at 6-11. We've been too high on the Broncos every year. I want to add that again. Every single year we've done this. We have, even though we try to feel like we're realistic and tough, because you see some shows out there going for the playoffs for sure. But that is something that will be worth monitoring. But every single year we've been a little bit too high. So 6-11, I hope that we're too low for once, Scott. We'll see what happens here. That final thought here before we get into it. Going through this, I think that I was very close to picking one of these other games and splitting like you did. Having Denver going 7-10 versus 6-11, that I really do like the over on the win total this season. I feel like it should be set at 6.5, not 5.5. So it's not so egregious that it's multiple games off, but I feel much more confident Denver wins 7, 8 games than I do they end up winning 3 or 4 on the other direction.
Well, we have four losses based on 4 in a row. November 3rd, 10th, 17th, and 24th. Ravens, Kansas City, Falcons, and at Raiders. And um, I don't think they go 0-4 in that stretch.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's where you pick one out of there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one final comment here. Well, we got 11-4 from Albert. Love that, Albert. Hope so. I see some 10-7, 9-8.
2 more games though. So what happens then? 11
Who
and
knows?
4 going into the Bengals and Chiefs game.
Yeah, that's a heck, man. It could be 13-4 that one. Michael says, interesting that the mind thought selections are all based on past events. Not one comment about where we might be better. Have this as my floor. If we stay healthy, we do better. There's just a lot of areas, right? I keep comparing it to like Yahtzee, right? You got to roll Yahtzees over and over again to have the best positive outcome for Denver. So like this season, Denver's defensive line should be a lot better than we saw last season. You're deeper at edge. You have more talent on the defensive line. We don't have to shout out Jonathan Harris or anything like that, or other guys out here. Purcell back available again, I think. But should be better there. That said, Lady Luck, on the other hand, is Denver going to have 99.6% of available offensive snaps for their offensive line be the starters again this season? Not likely. Not likely. It's just, every year it resets there. So there's going to be areas where they're better in improvement. There's going to be some areas where they're probably worse. So they're going to have the best turnover luck in a 5-game sample since 1991. Probably not happening again. But there's other areas too. So, right, that's why you play the game.
And the other thing to remind y'all of is how many teams are on here? 17 games, 3 repeats. So what, 14 games or so? 14 different teams. Every single one of those 14 teams feels the exact same way you do right now. Oh, we're better this year. We're better. We're better. We get tunnel vision. No discussion about where we've gotten better. You know what else there's no discussion of? There's no discussion about where they've gotten better. So there's some of that goes along too. And the Broncos, they weren't as bad. They weren't ever as bad as when they looked their worst. They weren't that bad. When they looked their best, they weren't that good. Now they're jettisoning $80 million in salary cap. I don't know that they automatically get better. It's like, okay, well, we got rid of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson had 26 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. That's as many touchdowns as the Broncos have had in a while. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Bo Nix has the same numbers that Russell Wilson had last year, he's going to win Rookie of the Year. And you're going to be sky high. That's what expectations do.
Yeah. We'll see. Caleb might have a pretty darn good season, and that's a team that's desperate. So it's not a normal, like if it was the Mac Jones year, right, he'd have a chance. Jamar Chase is great, but if it's Caleb Williams killing it, we'll see. Or Jaden Daniels, who knows? Troy comes, this is so hard to predict, 66 quarterbacks last year. These teams are going to look completely different by the end of the season too, right? So it is really hard to predict. You are absolutely right. There's always some team or 2 teams that have really great expectations that stink out loud and totally fall apart. And there's some team that nobody sees coming that dominates. That ends up being like, oh man, they got the magic sauce and it's really coming together there. Like would anybody is anybody talking about the Titans this season? What happens if all of a sudden Callahan has an incredible offensive line and Levis is the guy, right? There's things that can happen every year for those in the NFL. It's why you play the game. It's why it's the greatest singular sports product in the world, in my opinion. Now, Scott, you love the EPL as well, but NFL is just a lot of fun. Everybody pretty much has a chance any game, but if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance big picture. So hopefully Denver's got the guy, and that's the big point this season.
I actually like college football better. I like consequences for losing. I don't like rewarding losing.
Well, it doesn't matter now, right? You got 12-team playoff. So LSU lost.
Yeah, but it's like going through this, Florida looked awful. It's like, they're going to fire their coach. The recruiting's going bad. It's like there's actually consequences. You reward winners, you punish losers. I like that in competition. On that note, but yes, Troy, it's impossible to predict, but we're going to do it anyway. It's just an exercise. If our predictions were right the last couple of years, Broncos would be coming into their 4th straight year making the playoffs.
Didn't have them there last year.
I don't remember what we had. I swear I still had them probably 10-7.
I think I had them like 8-9.
I think I probably had them 10-7 last year. Perry West, appreciate you coming. He says, great analyst of the win-loss games, guys. Always enjoy the show when I can catch it. Our back seven is suspect at best. Yeah, there's a lot of questions back there. The safety scares the hell out of me position. You've got an unknown somewhat who's never been a full-time starter and a guy who keeps getting signed for $1 million in PJ Locke, and then injuries keep happening.
Yeah, you don't know about cornerback too. And
Yeah,
I don't want to be the
and then the
negative Nancy.
linebacker talk. And then, as much as the defensive line has improved, it's improved up to professional, like average. I don't think anybody's expecting, we've got one of the most dominating front fives in football. It's just not god awful.
Yeah. Yep. And one thing that has not been talked about a lot, Scott, that, don't want to be super hyper fixated or negative or anything, but like if you look at Jaquan McMillan's grades out there last year when he first started, when he was first interjected in the defense, awesome, creating turnovers left and right. I did an article where I talked about it. Like his average PFF grade was in the 70s, and then the last half of the seasons, it was in the low 50s. He was getting, especially that Patriots game, he got abused. So preseason camp sounds like he's been great, but I feel like everybody's like, oh yeah, we got a great player, Jaquan McMillan. He could be great, but last season he fell off a lot in the second half of the year after those turnovers started to come on and teams started to isolate him a little bit. So we'll see. We've gone over, we're hanging out, we're having fun. It's we're actually going to have our first preview episode next week. We're going to start to talk about the Seahawks. So fun team, a lot of question marks there. One of the most underrated quarterbacks in football, in my opinion, Geno Smith. He's been pretty good out there. When he's on. He's a fun player. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Make sure you we want to shout out to Nugmaster, Eric Flynn, Michael Ronquillo, Mike Evans, Gary Palmer, Brian Dunn, Troy Boer, Jetty Splash, Perry West, of course, and Michael again. Great show today. Nick and Scott on Broncos for Breakfast. Go Broncos. Thank you so much, Michael. We appreciate you so much. Make sure you guys are following us on Twitter. We got at Mile High Huddle, of course, as well as Scott and I at Scout Kennedy and at Nick Kendall MHH. Also follow us at Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. And as that ticker says there underneath, please subscribe to our show, like on our social media channel over here on YouTube, and share. Appreciate everyone. Yeah, Brian's 9-8 at worst. Love it. Let's
see my question on this for, because I haven't seen too many people saying, as low as Nick and I have been, is what if it is 6-11? So I like to think about expectations, and then we'll get going. Just think on this. What if it is 6-11? If your expectations are 10-7 and it's 6-11, well, the easy answer on this one, Nick, is Vance Joseph is gone. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be heads that are going to roll if these are your expectations. And I don't know that internally the expectations are 9-8 or 10-7. Not when you take on $80 million in dead cap. Not when you jettison 3 or 4 of your veteran leaders. It's a rebuild. It's absolutely a rebuild. They'll never, ever, ever say it. But this is a rebuild, retooling of the roster in order to set themselves up for success moving forward. This is a baseline type of year where we start. And that's one of the reasons why I've got the record lower. Every action they've taken has said, we are retooling, we are rebuilding, and that's okay. I want to see positive returns on my young players. That's what this season is to me.
Playing football the right way, playing hard and fast, people playing above their level as a collective. So maybe it's not going to be the season, that hanging any rafters or anything, but it could be the start of the path towards that. So we'll see. Who knows? Yeah, it had been 326 days. Oh, yeah, it's been 326 days since the Chiefs last beat the Broncos. Love it. Love it,
awesome.
Money more. And should be a fun season. Excited to see what happens. And you guys have a great rest of your day. We're going to get on out of here. I got to go get on baby duty. Continue to choose kindness, compassion.
It's a big
enjoy
duty.
Your Labor Day.
That's a big duty.
It was. Yesterday there was a notable.
We don't need to get into it. I believe you.
Yeah. Oh man, it's I never changed a diaper before. Had this guy, so it's interesting. But appreciate everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. Go Broncos.